What's going on, everybody? So today I wanted to talk a little bit about Premiere Pro. I work at a TV station as a video editor for my job, and the workflow that I do there with the type of editing I do and the workflow that I do here at home are usually like a little bit different, but there are some things that I use every single day, no matter what kind of workflow I have or what kind of work I'm doing. So I wanted to go through that today with you guys, give you some tips and some tricks inside of Premiere Pro to maybe make your life a little bit easier or help you learn if you're just starting. So these are 10 things that I use every single day. I also want to put this out there that it's for beginners. If you've used Premiere for a while, you already know these. Most of them are just shortcuts or little things. So please guys, since you're already here, just subscribe to my channel. It would help me out a lot. It would encourage me to make more videos like this. So let's go ahead and go into the computer and we'll start talking about this stuff. One thing I want to say really quickly before I get started is that I'm using a PC. So for my shortcuts, I'm going to be using Control. And if you're using a Mac, it's going to be Command. So every time I use Control on my PC, it's going to be Command for Mac. Okay, so we're inside of Premiere Pro. These are just 3 clips I dragged in of videos that, I've done before. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about, the first thing I usually do when I import clips into here is I make the audio bigger. So if you just grab this little line right here and drag it down, it makes the audio bigger. You can do that with any of these, the video too, and this line right here, it's gonna make it bigger. If you drag that line, it's gonna make that video area bigger. But I usually make my video a little bit bigger, but the main thing I want to talk about here is just the audio, because if you make your audio bigger, it's just going to make it a lot easier when you're trying to edit. If you're editing voices or something, you can see just the forms, the waveforms. You can see where the sound starts, and then you can make a cut right before it if you're just trying to single out the sound. It just makes everything a little bit easier when you can see where you're cutting versus blindly just cutting something that's really small like this and you can't really see where the audio is starting or not. All right, so the second thing that I want to talk about is the snap tool. So it's going to be this little magnetic icon right over here in the corner. I think on default it is normally on, but sometimes if you're using shortcuts and things, you might accidentally click it off and it won't be highlighted. So you want this thing blue. It makes your life a lot easier. So what that's going to do basically is if I have this and say, I want to get it butted up against this clip right here, what it does is it draws a black line across the whole timeline right here. You'll see the whole black line. And basically that just is the snap tool. It's putting it together without overlapping. That comes in handy when you're maybe cutting things up, whatever. You delete this and you want to, move this forward. It just helps out. So another thing that's nice with the snap tool is when you're trying to cut multiple things. So say let's add an adjustment layer here. Drag that on. And say I wanted to cut this adjustment layer at the same place that I'm cutting the timeline here. Okay, say I already have like a cut right here or something. So basically what this is going to do, the snap tool, when you drag this over, it's going to automatically snap like that to where the other ones are hitting each other. And it's a little hard to kind of go past it. So that helps it snap to that point. Another thing that's nice is if, say, it's in the middle here, you have a really long color grade or something like that, but you want to cut it right here at the same place. You cut, and you can see how when I hover over this, it makes a little black line through the whole thing. And that's going to show you, hey, you should cut there. And it's going to help you cut right where everything else is instead of, missing it by a little bit. So like, for example, let's turn this off right now. Okay, the magnet tool is off. So if I want to cut, you can see, look at all these little spaces I'm getting. Oh, I'm cutting. Oh, that's not quite in line with those. Try again. Oh, that's a little bit off. Unless I get really down close to where I can see each individual one, then it's easier to cut. But, you have all these options right here. So if you turn that magnet tool on, it's going to show you, this is where you need to cut in order to be in line with those other pieces. So that's really nice. So for example, to show you again, just if you had if you had the snap tool off, if you were trying to drag this in line, you know, you have nothing stopping you. You know, you could be one frame off, you could be something like that, unless you zoom all the way in and really look at it. Right here. Then you would be able to tell. Otherwise, you know, if you're far away, you wouldn't be able to see where you're at. But if you have this snap tool on, it's going to give you that line. You're going to know where you're supposed to be. So the third thing I want to talk about is the link selection tool. That's over here on the panel next to the magnet. And what this does is it unlinks and links your audio from your video. So when you import something from here, from your library or your project window, you automatically, your audio and video is automatically synced. You know, if I click the video, the audio is going to drag with it. If I click the audio, you know, the video is going to drag with it. Same thing if I'm cutting this. If I'm cutting this, it's going to cut both the audio and the video, and I can't do anything about it. I can't just cut the audio. I can't just cut the video. So one thing, if you want, you know, you don't want these things together, you want them to move separate, cut separate, you can right click and you can go up to unlink here, and that'll unlink it. So, you know, you can just drag one at a time. If you want to cut something, you're only cutting one of those instead of both of them. Okay? But, all right, let's delete this, drag it in again. If you have this checked, it's going to be linked, okay? But if you unselect it, that means instead of having to right click on every single clip, you know, to unlink it, you know, I can just move all of these off. As to where if I have this selected, now everything's connected again. If I want to move it, it's all connected. So for me, I personally just don't like having it on. I prefer having it unchecked. I prefer working with clips individually for the most part, but it can be better to have it checked just depending on, you know, what you're doing, what the project is, if it, you know, calls for needing separate audio and video tracks, things like that. Another thing it's good for is, say you got a bunch of these clips here, you know, you just want to take out all the audio, you just want to put music in the background. So normally, hang on, sorry, I got this unselected. So normally, you know, you go like this, have to highlight every single thing, right click, unlink, all that. But if you have this unselected, you can just go ahead and highlight it, delete it. It just kind of takes care of one step, but it still saves you time. So it's something to think about. It can be handy also. So moving on, number 4, this is just a shortcut. The next couple are just going to be shortcuts for people that don't know them. These are probably my favorite shortcuts. So the first thing I want to talk about is just the space bar. So number 4, the space bar. The space bar is going to play your video and it's going to stop your video, or pause it, I guess. So start and stop, simple as that. Otherwise, you got to come up here, push play and stop, play and stop. It's just easier to hit your space bar. You can have your mouse wherever you want it to be. You don't have to worry about, you know, dragging it back and forth between your timeline and this button. You can just start and stop. The next shortcuts I want to talk about are the C, the V, and the A shortcuts. So the C is for cut, the V is for select, and the A is for the track select forward. These tools are the ones I use the most. So you got your basic C is going to give you your cut tool. It's normally over here. You can select it here, the razor tool. But that's going to help you, you know, cut things in your timeline. So that's what that does. And then to go back to your cursor here is just V, and then that lets you drag things again. Those are the two biggest ones. You know, it's just switching between. It saves a lot of time just pushing CV, CV if you're just cutting and moving instead of having to click these every single time. The next one I want to talk about is A. That's the track forward, which looks like this. It's over here. Right here, sorry. Track select forward tool, A. And that also moves stuff. You're like, okay, Brandon, I can just use the select tool, move things forward. Why do I need the A tool? Okay, so the A tool is pretty neat. The select forward tool is pretty neat, I guess I should say. So say you got a bunch of clips here, okay? Got a bunch of clips, whatever. And what you're doing is you want to move everything, say. I want to move, say I want to insert a clip, you know, right here between these two. So I want to move all of these clips back. Okay, well, one way I can do that, I can do this. Okay, and I can move those all individually and insert a clip. Another way, you know, I can highlight everything and move it. Okay, but what happens when your timeline is like super long and you don't want to zoom out for this whole thing, you know? you're kind of close. You don't feel like zooming out, in and out. Yeah, sorry. You don't want to zoom in and out every single time you're trying to mess with this stuff. So all you gotta do is hit this A, and basically wherever you click, it's going to move everything behind it. So I can move it back, and now everything has moved. So I can just show you. So if I cut this up a lot, for example, if I hit the A tool now, I can move that back. I can move it all forward. I just move this back. It just kind of comes in handy because if you're just using select tool, you might make mistakes or oops, I accidentally put that on top of this and I didn't mean to do that. So having the select tool, that can just kind of bring everything forward and back without having to worry about maybe messing up any cross dissolves you have on there between your audio. If you're using the select tool and you move this, it's going to mess up what's between there. But if you use the A tool, it's going to drag it together and it's not going to break apart. So that's going to save you some time redoing all the things you broke apart if you wanted to move a big mass of sequences or clips. All right, so along with this track select forward tool, since you're kind of moving things forward and backwards all together. You're kind of moving things together. So I want to show you this other trick you've been seeing me use throughout this. So if you want to move everything forward, okay, I can hit this track select tool. I can move everything forward. All right. So another thing, and it only works for moving forward, but I just want to talk about it, is you can actually select this space in here, this blank space that you don't want, and you can just hit the backspace on your keyboard and it moves everything up that you just deleted. So it's pretty much the same thing as this tracking tool, but it only works for moving everything forward when you're deleting this empty space. But yeah, that keeps everything connected as well. That way you're not tearing some of the work you've done back here apart. Number 6, I want to talk about using the shift button when you're cutting. So this kind of comes in play in a couple of things. If you don't have this link selected and you want to cut something, you're only going to be cutting the audio or the video. And if you have the magnet tool, you can see where you cut. That line appears, you can cut it in the same place. But sometimes you're trying to cut things in the same place and you just are off or something like that if it's really zoomed out, whatever. So say you don't want to use the select, you want to have this unlinked because you don't like messing with everything together, but you want to cut both of these at the same time. Well, what you can do is you hit shift and then you see how it creates that white line. That means everything is going to get cut on the timeline there. So I cut it, boom, both my audio and video are cut at the same time. So another thing this works for is if I have an adjustment layer on here, and I want to cut the adjustment layer as well. All these are individual tracks right now, but I hit that shift button and boom, now everything cut straight line up, everything's in line, I don't have to worry about it. So that's one thing that I've found is super nice to know and super nice to use. All right, now the next one that I've also been using a lot in this tutorial already, number 7, is the undo button. You can, if I make some cuts here, okay, I don't like those, whatever, you can go up to File, Edit, Undo, but the shortcut for that is just holding Control and Z, and it just undoes it, and it works wonders. You can also kind of go backwards by holding Control Shift Z. You put, it's kind of the reverse undo. But yeah. So number 8 is actually using a marker. So basically what this is it's just going to mark your timeline without adding anything to the end product. It's just kind of for you to have as a reference. So say you're watching this, you finish your project and you're watching it through and you don't like something in it, okay? So you're like, oh, that color grade's off, I don't like that, whatever, it's a weird cut, and you just want to mark it. You come over here to this marker, click it, it's going to add a marker right there. It's not going to put anything in your video, so you're not going to notice if you have these when you export. You don't have to worry about deleting them if you don't want to. But, say you're watching this and you just decide, hey, I want to put a marker in there, okay. And that's just going to mark it. You can come back to it later, fix whatever you wanted to fix, and that's that. Another thing you can use it for is if you want to say, if you have a commercial break, like I use it at work a lot to mark where I want to go in and out to commercial breaks. So if I have something right here, I can just put a marker. Okay, that's like my first segment. And then I'll put this one over here. That's my second segment. And that way when I export in individual segments, I know where I should export. I only need to export this section or this section, things like that. It just makes the organization of the whole thing a lot easier. Another thing to go back on is that snap tool right here. That's handy for markers too if you have a cut, because it'll snap right to it and it'll be in line. You don't have to worry about it being off or anything like that. So the next thing, number 9, is going to be a favorites folder. I have a favorites folder right here. You can create it yourself. All you gotta do is hit this little icon right here. Sorry, let me unselect that. Okay, there, it's a custom bin. You can rename it, do whatever you want. But basically what you do is you find an effect that you use all the time. So, if you use cross dissolve, anything like that, you can just take it and drag it into that favorites folder, and then it's there. So instead of, if I use cross dissolves and constant power all the time for my video and audio. So instead of having to have these open every single time and dragging them from there, and these things, when you have these effects open, it can get pretty long and you might have to scroll, you might have to do whatever. And every time you open the program, you have to go through this. So just to save time, it's not a lot of time, but it can save time. It can be easier. Just having what you use the most. Oh, that's where those custom bins went. So yeah, just whatever you use the most, just have it right here. You just have to drop down this folder. You can just drag them right on. It makes it a lot easier. So yeah, that's that. You can also learn the shortcut for these constant power and dissolves if you want the shortcuts for those, if you don't want to drag things on top, but that's up to you. Okay, so now we're to number 10. The final thing is exporting. When you export, you can go to File, Export, Media, right? Then it brings this whole thing up. That takes a lot of steps. I'm just trying to be a minimalist, save time, not have to click and, maybe mess up where you're clicking, click the wrong thing if you're going fast. Just hitting Control and M brings up your export. It's just a lot faster. I've learned to really like it a lot instead of having to do 3 or 4 clicks. It sounds dumb, but in the long run, doing this constantly, especially if you're at a station and you're having to export things constantly, one right after the other, just using these shortcuts is a lot faster than having to click 4 or 5 times over and over again. All right, guys, so like I said, my workflow is a little bit different from at work and at home. These are the things that I use across the board. There are some different things that I use that are a little more advanced. And I can show you guys that in another video if you want. So just in the comments, let me know if you want to see those things. So yeah, guys, that's all I got. I hope you learned something if you're just starting, and I hope that'll help speed up your workflow. Give this video a like if it was helpful. Please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.